So I would say a wonderful welcome to everybody who has joined us for this very first prototype conversation of Management for Radicals. And it's a huge pleasure also for me to be here with Michele and to hopefully open a little bit of a conversation with everybody here about what are some of the things that we can improve in the way that we, I think, Michele, you said in the invite, lead, organize, and manage. And I think that frames it very well. So we're probably going to go across a whole bunch of topics. But maybe, Michele, do you want to frame the session, and then maybe we go a little bit through the rules of the go before the call before we start?
Yeah, sure. Well, thanks, Otti. The pleasure is mine. And you know, I mean, this idea just came from Otti and I having some casual conversations and saying, hey, maybe what we're talking about might be of some limited interest to other people. And so the idea of, you know, just opening things up more broadly just came about. So as Otti said, this is just kind of an experiment. We'll see if you find any, you know, we'd love your feedback, get your, you know, during the conversation and even after, in terms of where we take it. But we thought it would be helpful to have a place where we could talk about, you know, edgy kind of radical ideas when it comes to organizing and managing, because, you know, we don't see much of that out there, especially conversations that are a little bit unscripted, flexible, you know, where they go wherever the kind of wherever the conversation takes them, right? And the notion was to be kind of semi-structured, that is, you know, maybe have a few different blocks that, you know, may kind of be consistent over time, and then some topics that, you know, maybe a little bit the main course for each conversation. So yeah, so the idea would be to start off, you know, with some interesting things that we've come across over the last week or so, you know, share them with you, you know, have a bit of our own spin on those, have a conversation about a chunky topic. Today's topic is purpose, which, you know, we hear about everywhere, and then maybe leave the conversation with some tools and other practical things that, you know, you can use. So that's the basic idea. You know, I think we're quite humble about where this might go and the effect we will have, but we thought it was worth a try, because Otti and I are both passionate about transforming organizations, and we feel like we need to shake things up a little bit, so, and make things a little interesting, a little irreverent, but also useful. So Otti, I don't know if that makes sense. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe because it's a little unstructured, maybe we should create the container, Michele. As in coaching, we always say, if you want to create a safe space for a conversation, we need some sort of frame. And I think what I would offer as a frame today is, one, as we already said, if you want to be on video during the Q&A or whenever you intervene, please do so. If you don't want to be, just keep your video off. Secondly, I would suggest for everybody participating, I'll just start a little bit with screen sharing here. Chatham House rules. So everything that is in this room stays in this room as far as the participants are concerned, if that's okay. So you can quote people, but not their names. Of course, you can talk about what Michele and I say because we're in the public, but everybody else, I would suggest we stick to the kind of, you can talk about what was talked about, but don't mention the people in the room. If that's creating a bit of a safer feeling for everybody to be as radical and as outspoken and edgy as you want. And I think the second thing that I wanted to put up and offer as a bit of a frame is, the reason I think Michele and I wanted to have conversations like this is really to sharpen what Aristotle called phronesis. So the wisdom, the critical thinking, to look at things from different perspectives. So I think you will realize Michele and I won't agree on everything, but we will agree on the need to explore certain topics more in depth and with maybe a little bit less political correctness than what is often happening in the public domain, so that everybody on this call learns how to look at things with the help from everybody else. And this is, I think, a bit of a liminal conversation where we'll push it a little bit. And I think I would say, Michele, the role of the audience, what would you suggest? How should people interact with us?
Well, maybe you can share your thoughts on chat. If you're joining us through Zoom, share your comments on LinkedIn as we go along, and we'll be monitoring to the best of our ability, and we'll definitely want to create time towards the end of it for some back and forth. We'd like this to be interactive. So yeah, and by the way, like honestly, in how many management conversations you're going to hear mentions of phronesis and Aristotle. So we're already starting by setting a very high bar in terms of like our intellectual heft here. So let's make sure we stay high.
We keep up. I would say, and with that, maybe, Michele, what we should probably be doing, even if most people will probably have connected because they know us to a degree, is maybe a quick introduction. And again, I would just like to invite everybody to just make sure you're on mute, as we will get some audio feeds otherwise. Michele, maybe in 60 seconds, I will throw a question to you. Who are you? What made you come here today? And what is something that not everybody on the call knows about you?
Well, so I'm someone who's very passionate about creating organizations that are fit for the people that work inside them and for the societies in which they operate. I've been on this kind of mission for the last 20 years. I came at it from more of a strategy angle because I was looking at organizations being not as capable as they could be, and more as resilient, as innovative. And I realized after some kind of head scratching and research that the fundamental limiting factor is the organization, how these institutions are led, managed, and organized, as you said earlier, Otti. So that's my passion. I've written about it. Most recently in a book with Gary Hamel. Yeah, I just want to create opportunities for us to have dialogue, as I said earlier, about these topics. And fun fact, I guess, or fact that people may not know, is that I'm originally from Italy. My name maybe gives that away, but I've been living in the U.S. now since 1994. So I've kind of split identities across the pond. What about you, Otti? Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and what made you decide to partner up with me on this?
Thank you. And maybe Manda, just to let you know, Manda has gone. I just wanted to say again, if you don't want to be in a video live stream, please just switch your video off. Can I invite everybody on the chat, if you want to be in this dialogue and conversation, to just do the same. If you want to just with one sentence, give other people a little glimpse of who you are and where you come from, and maybe one thing that you can offer in terms of anyone interesting to connect with you guys, because I think this is as much about dialogue and connection as it is about Michele and I talking. So where do I come from? Born in Germany, spent about a third of my life in Italy, another third in the UK. German and British passport. And similarly to Michele, but maybe from the other side, so from the cold face of organizations over the last 25 years in different sectors, I've tried to contribute a little bit to making organizations better. So from my first experiences as an entrepreneur, then in nonprofit, then in consulting, in telecoms, and ultimately in banking, I've tried to understand how organizations can become places where people really love to work. Someone suggested that work is love made visible. Well, I don't know about you guys, but that hasn't always been my experience. And I think we can get a lot better, going back to what organizations are really great at, which is bringing people together to do something that individually they couldn't possibly do. And maybe the one thing I will add to this is, in my experience, very often I had to change myself in order to enable the system to go to a different level, as opposed to me becoming the transformer of everybody else around me. I tried that as well, but it hasn't always come to great fruition. I don't know about experience of the people on the chat. And maybe with that, Michele, shall we go to tops and flops, our first interesting section? What has happened in the world in the last week or month? And yeah, we have a few slides or links for you. And Michele, I'm going to hand over to you on this one first.
All right, let's start with the highlights, and then we'll do the lowlights. But for the highlights, cool. I have a couple I wanted to share. And by the way, I'm going to share a screen so that you get a little bit more interesting visuals than just me talking. But we'll also put up links on the LinkedIn event page. I think I can add comments and links. So if you ever want to check out these resources, you can go there. But so this is an article in Fortune magazine that appeared on the 11th of June. And it's about a CEO of a mid-sized company that says, I just raised my company's minimum wage to 25 an hour. And for those who don't live in the US, you may not be aware of the fact that the minimum wage, federal minimum wage, some states have a higher one, but it's 12. So this CEO said, I'm gonna do a more than 2x increase in minimum wage. And and other retailers have kind of followed suit or just are increasing their wages. And it's got an interesting article, and it talks a little bit about why they did that, and and the impact that it has, and it's really framed around the fact that this actually makes good business sense because people are more motivated and loyal to the organization and more willing to contribute. And I'm like, this is great that we're rediscovering the concept that economists call efficiency wages. So the whole idea is that you pay little people more than the kind of the market wage to get those kinds of contributions from people. Something that, by the way, Henry Ford did in 1914 with Ford, paying people, I think it was 2 or 3x the minimum wage of the time. And it's like, what a concept, right? You pay people more and they're more committed. It's like, I mean, in a way, it's good. I mean, it's good to me that people are getting religion, but I'm like, how is this even like worth? I mean, it's kind of sad in a way that it's that we have to kind of bring this up and say, well, people are finally getting it. But there you go. I guess it's better than nothing. So that's the first highlight.
Maybe we shouldn't talk about purpose, but just about paying people better. But Michele, sorry for interrupting. Catherine is saying on the LinkedIn live stream, there's some delays, and she's looking for the Zoom link. I think the Zoom link is in the description of the event page. So Catherine and anyone else who wants to join on the Zoom site, you can just look under the description and click on it.
Yeah, and if Catherine has a problem, we can maybe find it and paste it as a comment, Otti, I don't know. All right, so anyway, so let me just, so Catherine, let us know, and we'll help you out. The second kind of interesting story is a great New York Times magazine piece, which I think is free to access. There's no paywall, but it's a wonderful account. It came out a couple of days ago of the campaign that Engine Number One, which is an activist investor, made to get board seats on the Exxon board. ExxonMobil, the large energy company. It's a wonderful account of like the drama and and how they had to kind of outmaneuver management that wanted to stifle their move to add seats on the board. And I think it's a good story because it highlights the importance that activist investors are often quite maligned. They're often perceived to be actors that are pushing companies to be very myopic and focus on the short term. But this is a case of activist investors trying to get management actually to face the future, face reality, and pivot the company towards a better future. And one of the things that they have done to kind of illustrate their thesis and drive their campaign is a presentation of like why Exxon needs a radical change in strategy and governance, and why their candidates should get on the Exxon board. And I highly encourage you guys to take a look at it because it's very interesting. It's all framed around, I mean, the purpose is to get the company to embrace a future that is less dependent on energy, on fossil fuels. But the whole thesis is couched around the fact that Exxon is pissing away shareholder value, pardon my French, and they're misallocating capital. They're like not reacting to a strategy shift that will make them less relevant. And so even from a narrow shareholder perspective, they need to pivot. So it's a very good case that they're making. And then they have some crazy statistics, including this one I want to share with you. Around,
I think we will see a lot of this in energy, Michele, won't we? I mean, energy sector is predestined to have more of these cases.
Yeah, well, and maybe this is the short one. Anyway, I'll say, but there's one. They have a great slide where they show executive compensation going up and shareholder returns going down, and they're like, WTF, right? And you're right, Otti. I think you'll see this in energy. But I tell you, even like, I think Nelson Peltz of Triton Capital, which is, seen as like an evil activist investor, when it comes to like a company like AT&T, they've in their push, they're like, you guys, like, why are you doing all these mergers that are wasteful? You're going to write off billions of dollars 10 years, 5 years from now, because you're trying to catch up to an industry shift you're late to, and you're going to waste a lot of money. So there's something to be celebrated and appreciated about activist investors pushing managers to be less, geared towards building empires, and to be like much more willing to shift the company's strategy, as opposed to being so inertial. So anyway, those are two.
Maybe it's another topic almost, right? Because you remember what happened at Danone, and remember what happened at Nordea, right? Where activist shareholders came in, and arguably they didn't act in the interest of, at least the planet, let's put it that way. So I think indeed a very interesting development there.
Yeah, so those are my tops. What are yours, Otti?
Oh, that was fast. Let me bring up a slide as well. So firstly, for all the friends that are in Europe and have suffered through this, I wanted to remind you it's the 5th anniversary of Brexit. And anyone who is wondering what now under the line what the results of Brexit are, here's the Guardian with an opinion piece that you might be interested in. And basically it's saying it's too early to tell, especially because all of the statistics got superimposed by the pandemic. So it's very difficult to tell whether less trade is an effect of Brexit or it has to do with less trade volumes in general. But Polly Toynbee here is suggesting, as anticipated, it's worse for everybody. And of course, I'm a Remainer, and you will claim that I'm biased, but I would suggest that was probably something we could have figured out beforehand. So first thing on the flop side, so to speak, Brexit, even if it's with uncertainty. The next one I got is more of a discussion piece, Michele, on Morgan Stanley, and I wonder what you think. So I was on a number of calls where this actually came up in the context of hybrid working, especially also on the President Summit call, I think day before yesterday, with Linda Grattan talking about the future of hybrid working. And here it seems that some of the investment banks, so it's JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley, are asking everybody to come back into the office. And actually this piece here by, I think it came over a number of news agencies, is suggesting that if you as an employee don't make it back into the office and you cannot prove that you have been vaccinated, you might A, end up with less salary, or B, get fired. And I thought that was certainly not the policy that when I was still in banking 4 or 6 weeks ago, I would have sustained. What's your view on this?
Banking and FaceTime are almost like synonymous, right? The notion that you have to be there, and you have to be there until, especially if you're investment banking, until midnight, so, I think it's a little bit cultural. I don't know how much of this goes beyond banking, to be honest. People are talking about the fact that it's easy for executives to call everybody else because they don't have maybe as bad as a commute, and it's a form of control that they want to reassert, which is probably fair. On the other hand, there's plenty of control and monitoring that can happen virtually. So, yeah, And I
was anticipating that you would say that, Michele. So I armed myself with another piece here from The Economist business last week. So here you can see, if you go to the last bit, a court in France, and this is arguably historical, right? But a court in France fined IKEA for spying on its staff through a surveillance system.
Right.
So exactly what you said. So I think on the other hand, even beyond banking, there's of course a potential danger that people come up with sophisticated systems to control people even working in their home office. But clearly this seems to imply it's not only beyond banking. So any views?
Yeah, no, for sure. And we should maybe do like a session just on digital Taylorism, or whatever you want to call it, because there is this, very scary scenario where, technology, instead of liberating people, is actually used to to control and power bureaucracy more than it was before. So yeah, so I totally agree. Do you have anything else?
Last one is just on Satya Nadella. You and I discussed this. The Superman of Microsoft has now become both chairman and CEO. whilst Microsoft is starting to become part of a very exclusive club of companies that are hitting the $2 trillion market cap, whilst, as I have been saying, and I know you don't want to go there, but it has not paying any taxes in Europe in spite of the clear increase in revenues and market cap. But I think what I wanted to highlight here is, at least for me, this is a flop. I don't believe that in terms of corporate governance, it's a great idea to have chairman and CEO combined. What's your view on that one?
Yeah, I know. I think, to the extent that you're concentrating power, you are making the organization more exposed to the fact that you may, have someone who is, not exercising that power effectively. And, the arguments that, oh, we just need to find the right person in that role and then give that person ultimate authority. As we've seen in history, in political history, that's often not a good strategy, right? It backfires because like you're asking too much out of too few people. I guess my only riff on Microsoft, because it did reach this 2 trillion milestone, everybody's celebrating it and saying, oh, Nadella was fantastic. And fair enough. I mean, the Nadella has, there's also a lot of credit. But I guess to me, the kind of the irony is that, what fueled the success of Microsoft is a shift away from Windows, away from the PC-centric view of the world towards the cloud and other kinds of devices. And this is something that was long known at Microsoft before Nadella took over in 2014, right? And there were lots of people that had great prototypes, great visions for how this pivot might have happened, in 2007, in 2010, and they were stifled, by the previous, leadership team there, right? That just was unwilling to go there. And one of the first things that Nadella said in 2014 was, we have to recognize that the world has changed and we need to take a different shift. And so it's great that it happened. But the fact that it takes a CEO change, back to your point about concentrating power, the fact that it takes a CEO change for a company to intercept the future, even though within the company there's a consensus that shift needed to happen, speaks volumes about our incapacity, right, to be resilient in organizations. Because if we can only move as fast as our leader at the top, then we may not move very fast at all.
As you say, there's symbolism as well, as you describe in your book on, I think you call it bureaucracy mass index, right? The BMI for management. The symbolism here is command and control, right? And indeed, but let's go to the flops, to the tops. Sorry, we had the flops.
Oh, you did the flops. My only, so I went the other way just to make.
You had tops, I had flops.
I did. And, okay. So I have one more thing to share, and then we can move on to purpose, because people may want to talk about it. Hey, Otti, I'm not hearing you. You there?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just checking up on John. It's wonderful. John is joining as well, John Ingham.
Okay.
And who, of course, has a lot to say about organization as well in his
sure.
work
Hey, John, thanks for joining us.
On HR.
All right, cool. So the only, other.
Yeah, I think we agree the EU is not very helpfully organized. That's what John is contributing to the last point. Yeah, I fully support.
We need a reorg, right? Okay. So reorg of the EU. So am I sharing my screen? Hold on one sec. One last thing, and then we might move on to purpose. Otti, if you and whatever else you want to share. But my last thing I wanted to highlight in terms of articles, again, New York Times Magazine. They're on a roll with great reporting. This is about the CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control. It's the premier federal agency when it comes to public health in the United States. They're the ones who set out federal guidelines around testing, around mask mandates, and whatever. And it's an article that goes very deep into the organizational dysfunction within this entity, and how it was that lack of organizational capacity that led them to be incredibly slow at responding to whatever was happening throughout the pandemic, even during the testing phase. Before the virus even hit the United States with full force in February, March, and the fact that they were stifling experimentations and local initiatives around testing. But it's a must read if you're interested in sort of how organizational incompetence really had a huge impact on the course of the pandemic in the United States. And there was an interesting line let's see if I can find it. Which was like, I don't know if I can find it, but basically they're saying, you know, the agency is great at working up and down, but very bad at working horizontally and integrating perspectives and points of view from across the organizations, from across the silos, which, you know, obviously cost us dearly. But I guess you could probably say the same thing about a lot of other organizations where, they're all organized for verticality, and it's very difficult to kind of do things horizontally. Anyway, I think it's worth a read if you're interested in this stuff.
And I think, again, as we suggested, all the links will be available afterwards if you want to link into the articles. And I would also invite everybody on the chat. Did you have any examples, good or bad, on companies or things more in general? Because I think some of these very dry management topics come to life if we have some real examples. So please do share them. We're really interested. I'll share just very quickly, because we want to go into the purpose topic. 3 more pieces here. The first, actually, Michele, came from you. I think you posted about this earlier. We have not only activist investors who are supporting of more long-term purpose, so to speak, of companies, but here we have Twilio and Asana listing on what is it? It's a new stock exchange for ESG investment, right? It's very interesting. So we're getting some big players to support the movement, which I think is a top for me. Similarly, I have to say, even if this is a lot more controversial, the judgment by the court in Den Haag, in The Hague, about Shell, which I think some of you might be aware of, that Shell in a first instance was asked to reduce their CO2 emissions by net 45% by 2030, which of course for a company like Shell is a huge, huge challenge. Now, there's a big argument to be had as to whether we should have the courts ruling on what companies need to do in this regard, which I fully support. But I think for me, it was very nice to see that we are starting to make these things necessary for big organizations. And here, if you look at this specific article, it's very interesting, just for you maybe to take in the Dutch Civil Code, as you can see there in the highlighted sentence. There is an unwritten standard of care, which was becoming part of the motivation for this judgment. So in the Dutch culture, this notion that you can do lots of things as a private company, but you cannot go against a kind of standard of care that is almost implicit, a moral standard that everybody has to abide by. So I thought it was really interesting. And final point, it's actually about an individual rather than a company, even if the company is involved. And I just wanted to highlight my dear friend Carlo Giardinetti, who here I think is one of the people who's starting as a consumer to walk the talk. And he said he had a subscription with a phone company, but instead of going with the offer to renew his iPhone or any other device that he might have wished and he would have gotten for free, he went on a search for a truly ethical phone. And he found this company called Fairphone, which is creating mobile phones that are truly ethical throughout the whole supply chain. So I think it's a good example, both of the company trying to go there and also for consumers standing up to walk the talk. And with that,
those are cool. Can I just say one thing on the long-term stock exchange? So you guys may or may not know, but it was founded by Eric Ries, who came to fame with the whole lean startup methodology. And he was a serial entrepreneur, and he dabbled after, well, more than dabbled, I should say. It's unfair to say he dabbled, but after the success of lean startup, he started to help companies, apply that methodology at scale, most prominently at GE before, what happened to GE afterwards, which is, kind of a long-term decline based on write-offs and bad decisions made by Immelt and his friends at the headquarters. But he moved towards investment and creating patient capital through, something like the long stock exchange, because he realized that at the end of the day, like, that's the leverage point. Like, yeah, you can try to change, you can try to prototype things in your company, you can try to change a company at a time, but these companies are embedded in a network of institutions, and they face all kinds of pressures. So his bid now is to, focus on that, focus on investors as the leverage point. And I'm so glad that he was able to recruit a couple of pretty prominent companies to list there. And I think that's definitely maybe another topic. Maybe we write this down, Audie. You're just like talking about investors
it's
and
a
their
very,
role.
very nice one.
Because
I agree.
because I've become more and more convinced that that's we need to, like, in a way, like in our book we talk about activism from the bottom, and that's fine, but you need to pressurize the system from the top, right? And I think that's what he's trying to do there.
And I think Marcani was very similar in his suggestions, in terms of, on the one hand, we need disclosure and we need to make sure the institutional framework is right. On the other hand, we need organizations to behave ethically, which brings us to our core topic for today. And I think Jochen on the live chat is also making a point that at the end, it is about trusting your people and focus on getting things done. I think this is leading us nicely towards the purpose thing. But someone might need to go on mute. Purpose, of course, this is a big debate. And Michele and I had a little pre-chat to see how we could possibly frame this. And I think we want to talk about a few things in terms of purpose, what it is, individual and organizational. We want to talk about why it's relevant and why is this actually new? And I know Michele's view on this, right? Why is it coming up now? And then maybe also what's the underlying discussion, right? Is it really about purpose or is it about something else? And here we will try to stick within the time that we have, because some of these correlated conversations could take us weeks, I guess. So Michele, can I ask you maybe to start to just frame it? When we speak about purpose and why it is relevant, what comes up for you?
So,
or maybe why we have chosen this topic as well.
Yeah, well, I think we've chosen this topic because in previous conversations, we were just despairing about like how much confusion there is about this, about the issue of purpose, and how it's used in all sorts of ways, and often maybe not in a particularly, honest or authentic way. So I guess maybe this is our humble attempt at sort of trying to clear up what this term really means, at least what it means to us, and how can we, how we might be able to think about that and use some of these ideas in sort of our own professional lives. To me, the purpose is really about, answering the question of, what can we contribute, right, as an organization. So it's less about, how can we succeed, right, and more about what can we give, what kind of contribution can we make. And maybe I posted this on the event page, but let me I want to share something from you just to make this point a little clearer. See if I can do this. Give me a sec. I think I need to play this. Okay, because these. Let's see here. Give me a sec. The beauty of live streaming. Okay, share my screen. Okay, here. So this is David Packard, the founder of Hewlett Packard, one of the most iconic Silicon Valley companies, basically the Google of the 80s and the 70s. And he is one of the co-founders. And he said this at a meeting with other managers of HP in 1960, right? So we need to go deeper. Like, why are we doing this together? Why are we working together? And it's not about the money, right? It's about doing something that is worthwhile, something that contributes to society, right? And then he said this, like, why do we exist? And he said, we're able to make things, instruments, they're making calculators, scientific instrumentation, and so on, that are just unique. Like we have this amazing capacity to create instruments that are helping people do their job as scientists, as engineers, and whatever. And our contribution is to design, develop, and manufacture electronic measuring instruments. So this is their definition of why, how they contribute. And so there are a couple of things I wanted to highlight here. First, this is in 1960, okay? And so like, it's not particularly new. And if you look at, if you look at what Jim Collins and others were saying in the 80s and the 90s, this notion of creating a purpose that goes beyond individual contributions and monetary success, that's like well accepted, right? So somehow rediscovering it, a bit like efficiency wages, which is fine, but let's recognize that it's, Jim Collins has a nice quote pushing back on a lot of the purpose spiel in these days, which is like, don't confuse what's rare with what's new. Like effective companies have always been guided by a purpose. The other thing that here is, Otti might disagree, but to me, the purpose of creating amazing instruments that help people, the way Hewlett Packard has framed their contribution to society, is a perfectly legitimate purpose. It's about customers, and it's about enabling them and empowering them. It's not about like saving the planet, like in a lofty, it's not about tethering your purpose to the Millennium Development Goals of the UN. I mean, some companies might want to do that, but I feel like sometimes we overreach. We're trying to make toothpaste, something that saves the world, or it has to have a social purpose. It can be like a perfectly good toothpaste can be worthwhile, right? It doesn't, and so like we can be a little bit more honest and more humble about how we frame purpose in a way that actually is authentic, a little bit like the way HP did it. So that's my little provocation. I don't know, Otti, how you might want to react to that.
Very nice. And I will build on it. And indeed, I will challenge it a little bit. I think, as you know, in my thinking, I'm going back to Aristotle and virtue ethics. And I think sometimes we go into a consequentialist thinking where we're measuring on, is a purpose good by what it produces? I think there's a lot to say about the necessity to also make sure that the aim is good and the way we produce is good. And I think, as you say, in that regard, producing a toothpaste that is healthy and supporting people in their daily hygiene is certainly good, I would argue. But you would probably also need to look at, how is it being produced? Are the ingredients healthy? Is the supply chain one that is fair, so to speak? Are employees treated in the right way? And I think this is, and you have written about this extensively, I think where good purpose probably implies a process, a journey, more than just a destination. And secondly, I think what we know in the European tradition, which is not as prevalent in the American or Anglo-Saxon tradition, is that idea of an honorable entrepreneur. And the honorable implies caring for people, profit, and planet, right? So it's more the stance that these people say, and you see that in family businesses or foundation-owned businesses where, yes, they're producing goods and services, but they try to also take care of all the other pieces of the puzzle. And I think maybe to the point, why is this coming up now? I think lots of people have lost faith that the purpose statements that these companies put up there are actually really caring about them. And I think your point on individual purpose, I think we should go into maybe a little bit. The other thing is, of course, that there's in my belief, a deep dissatisfaction with the system we have created. So this version of capitalism, which has crystallized over the last 20 years in many people's beliefs, and you see it in the statistics, more than 56% of people believe capitalism does more harm than good. And the basic idea that the economy is separate from society, I think, is fundamentally flawed. So there is, I believe, a necessity to, not necessarily, as you say, and not every company needs to save the world, but to display a degree of caring for people and planet in everything we do, whatever we do. What's that for an opinion?
Yeah, no, it's fair, but and I think Jim Collins talked about the core ideology of a company, and he had two things. He displayed it as a yin and yang, as a Taoist symbol. So you had purpose. It's like, why are we in business? What kind of contribution do we want to make? And then what are the core values of the company, right? And you can certainly have values like, and certainly in the case of HP, the primacy of the individual as an employee, right? And the fact that you're trying to empower that person to be an entrepreneur, to be a business owner, to have autonomy, self-direction, the kinds of, things that lead to human flourishing in the Aristotelian sense. Those are all there. So you kind of have to have both. I guess trying to conflate or try to kind of, I think a lot of companies are trying to make their purpose statements work too hard. they're trying to make them, be the saviors of the universe, when, first, maybe that's not the right way to frame it. And second, it's not authentic, right? Because it's not really what they are, right? Is Coca-Cola going to save the world with sugary drinks? No, but maybe they can contribute in some other way. So that's just my only pushback, which maybe then leads us to the conversation around, can you have a purpose that is credible if you're not enabling people to be reach their own personal purpose or fulfill their personal purpose in their work, right? So can you be like, imagine if Patagonia, they have this amazing social kind of purpose, but what if they were managed like Amazon, right? So would their corporate purpose ring true? They have their brand might be perceived as a brand that is about the planet, but if they're treating people like semi-programmable robots, the meatware that can be replaced, then what does that leave you, right? It's completely hollow, right? Because in a way, like if your employees are treated like crap, then you can have the loftiest purpose in the world. It's just not going to take you very far.
And I think this is also, so one Ray on the chat is saying every system, socialism, communism, whatever, will have the associated problems. I think that is certainly true. And I think some of these discussions are had at a more ideological and far too high level with people who are not prepared to go into the facts and details, and maybe don't have the predisposition to dialogue to actually resolve them. And secondly, Tim is suggesting on the chat, neither is Coca-Cola going to save the world by selling a small bottle of water for $2. So I think there's also, we come to this, and we didn't want to go there today, this notion of appropriate profit, right? So what is the notion of profit in this system, and what does that mean? But I would rather go to another point that you just made, which is about individual purpose, because my impression was, again, coming out of typical large organizations, that very often the idea was we create those lovely PowerPoint slides with a very nice looking, ideally poetic kind of purpose for the organization. And then the idea is it's so great that everybody has to fall in line, right? And we will bring people to buy in and empower them to live the purpose of the company. And I think, especially through the work of Bob Keegan, who writes about deliberately developmental organizations, I've come to a different notion where I think the purpose, if we use kind of Dave Snowden's complex system language a little bit, I think it has to become an attractor that serves so that people can rally around a cause that is good to create something that individually they couldn't possibly achieve. But by the same token, I think the organization has a mandate to help individuals to develop, find their own purpose and live it, which might of course imply that sometimes people find out that the corporate purpose is not in line with their individual purpose. But I believe that there is an educational aspect, or also an aspect to build the organization around the people. And I think, Michele, I think the subtitle of your Humanocracy book is building organizations as awesome as the people that are in the organizations, right? So I think this is a little bit what you're describing. So what would you say? Is purpose also enabling the individual purpose? Is that part of what the YOLO factor is about? Is you only live once, and 70% of people revising their purpose and trying to find better employment?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. So I totally agree with you that companies are taking purpose and using it in a very instrumental way. So first of all, they think it's something you manufacture by just calling, a consultant and just thinking big thoughts. And, you just write it down and that's your purpose. And then, with this, it's a great purpose. People will be inspired and they'll give their best because it's a great purpose, so that's not, in a way, like, yeah, you want to be deliberate about your purpose, but it's, you don't just concoct it. Right. And secondly, as you say, yeah, of course you want to have people that share the purpose, the overall purpose, but as you say, that in a way that's necessary, but not sufficient. Right. Because, and not to kind of, I know we're over indexing on Aristotle, right? But like, how does he define the good life, right? He defines it as one where people are able to be self-directed. In a way, like, what's his name? Dan Pink talked about it, updated the Aristotelian view in the 2000s, right? With that book Drive, where it's what is it? It's mastery, autonomy, mastery, and purpose, right? So, like, if you don't give people the ability to be self-directed agents inside of companies, they're not going to be able to flourish, and they're not going to be able to fulfill their purpose, right? And so companies that talk the good game with corporate purpose, but then like don't give people the autonomy, the freedom, the agency inside, are just, to me, at best incomplete in their vision of purpose, and often kind of hypocritical, right? And let me just share one thing, and then I'll shut up, Otti. But it struck me when I saw this, and it kind of depressed me a little bit. Some of you might have seen it. It's a survey that McKinsey ran around purpose, and how whether people are
with the executives.
Yeah. This is basically this chart where they asked thousands of people, I think in the US, are you able to live out your purpose at work every day? And then they kind of shared it. They segmented results by levels of the hierarchy. So what you can see here is that executives and senior managements are all like Maslowian, self-fulfilled, self-actualized beings at level 5 or whatever of his hierarchy of needs. And employees, 85% are saying we're living out our purpose, we're living out the dream. And then frontline supervisors, so the first level of supervision, and the people below them, the vast minority, basically almost no one says that, right? So, and by the way, you might say, some people might push back and say, well, yeah, but if you're like a grunt working in a warehouse, you'll find fulfillment outside of work, and you're not going to put much weight on work, so you're going to have a good life somewhere else. But McKinsey, I don't have the slides here, but they asked the question, like, do you find, how important is work in finding your life's purpose? And it was as important for low level. I caught myself talking the bureaucracy speak. People lower down in the organization, it was as important for them as it was for executives, right? So this is
itself could be a problem, right?
Well, but the fact of the matter is, Otti, you spend a bunch of your time at work, so it's part of who you are. And the fact that you can't actively use that to flourish, to fulfill yourself, is to me, it's a tragedy, and it's unacceptable. And the fact that we're not talking about this, we're talking about purpose, at this kind of high corporate level, often inauthentically, and not talking about what this means for people and organizations, to me, it's kind of a scandal.
I agree. And here I think, and Susie is making a similar point on the chat, right? People define themselves as their success or their role. And hence, in that regard, I would say there's a difference between self-determination theory, which of course Dan Pink is building on, and the Aristotelian notion of eudaimonia, where I would see some of the developmental stages necessary, right, to actually redefine identity and explore who you really are, which I think is correlated. And here maybe some of these 85% of managers are more narcissistic and sociopathic in their desire to control others and dominate, which makes them feel very good about themselves, as some of the others who, of course, are subjugated in that system. And I think the only possibility, as Carol Sanford is saying, out of this is everybody, like you say, needs to become self-determined, and I would argue willing to embrace the whole, because this is where I think closing the discussion on purpose maybe. So I think we're saying, you started out by saying creating a good toothpaste, creating a good product can be a purpose. I think my invitation is to add to that, as long as there's caring for the whole, including all the stakeholders and the planet at large, then I think there's no contradiction. And I think we're adding the notion to that the system of the organization has to be built in such a way that allows both individual and collective flourishing. And I think the individual flourishing is agency. The collective flourishing requires people to be willing to go into interdependence. And here, again, a little resource that I really like. Let me see if I can bring it up for the...
Hey, Andrea, can I ask you, Andrea, to maybe put yourself on mute?
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Don't worry at all. This wasn't planned, but it came just to my mind because Henry Mintzberg has this really nice book about rebalancing society. And he created this website, which is called ourinterdependence.org. I might not bring it. It's mixing up. I'll say it out loud, ourinterdependence.org. And what he's suggesting is that actually as agentic adults, as people who have reached self-determination, we should all subscribe voluntarily to a declaration of interdependence so that we're willing to embrace the good for everybody and make this work.
I agree. I would just say one thing, and then we can open it up, Otti, just as a rejoinder. I think if you actually, instead of working top down, so let's think big thoughts about our corporate purpose and cascade that down. What a horrible word, cascade, by the way. And then hopefully this will be meaningful to people. We should start the other way around. Let's create an organization where people can, be self-driving, self-fulfilling, and and agents with autonomy and mastery and all of that. And then if you do it that way, in a way, the corporate purpose, I think, will emerge quite naturally and be very authentic, right?
Very nice.
Because if you look at a company like Nucor that makes steel, they are very much focused on the empowering people, right, and giving them the ability to be little business owners and so on. And then what I've never forget what the CEO told me once when I was interviewing him. He said, "We don't build steel. We said we build people. People work here. People build families, and families build communities. And the community impact we have isn't because we have a community impact department. It's because the people that work for us can have a positive impact." And so, I just think that we often downplay that because it's harder than just saying, "Hey, here's our new purpose statement." But I think that's the way you do it. And I
think it links nicely to, and maybe this really is the closure on this one. I think Meg Wheatley once made this point that people misunderstand purpose. And she suggested that many people, when they talk about purpose, they think about a glorified mission statement and they create poetic expressions of where they want to go and then create milestones behind it to reach. And before they know it, they're back in the old kind of hedonistic treadmill. And she said, in reality, purpose is different. Purpose is about taking a step back, exploring the situation, the circumstances, the networks and the constellations you're in, and asking the question, what can I do to make this system better? It's not about you. It's not about another goal. It's about, with the resources, the capabilities, the people, like you say, that I have, how can I contribute? And that was your first word, Michele. So I think we end on that again. How can I contribute to make what I can do better? So I think that maybe we've added a little bit of value to this conversation. So purpose is not so simple as some people might say. And Mihaly's point on abundance, I think, is also a very nice one on the chat. So I think we have a few more minutes left, Michele, and maybe we promised some tools. Shall we maybe just flick them up? And then if people have any questions, but I would also say everybody on the chat and on the LinkedIn live chat as well, but we have, I think, 50 people on the Zoom chat and the others on the LinkedIn chat. If you have any tools that you would recommend to your peers on the call and colleagues, please, again, throw them out there. We're going to capture all of the chats, of course, and send them out. But Michele, do you want to share a few resources as we promised?
Okay, cool. I have a tool, collection of tools I wanted to share. I'll do this super quick so we have time for some discussion. And by the way, I know people in Europe, it's getting late in the day where you are, but I'm happy to stay on for a little longer if you guys want to keep talking. But let me share this real quick. So I found this through Helen Bevan. You may know Helen. She works at the National Health Service. She's an amazing practitioner and thinking around large-scale change. She has an amazing Twitter thread, and in her thread, she highlighted this website called Toolbox. It's got all kinds of interesting tools that you can use for different purposes: innovation, team building, leadership, well-being. It's bucketed by how long the exercise lasts, how many people are participating, and each of them is a little card, and you can click on it, and it'll tell you more about it and give you some practical advice on how to do this. Some of these tools you might have certainly seen before, but I like the fact that it's a nice, easy to find, easy to navigate collection of things that can help you and your teams just be more human. So Otti, that was my little...
That looked really great. Sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. I will do very similarly, very fast, if I find my screen. So here, I want to do a shout out for our friends around Ted Rao and the Sociocracy for All project. because I think what the guys are doing in Sociocracy is very, very compelling, right? And I think many people on the chat, like Tim and so on, have deep knowledge about some of the methodologies here in terms of holacracy, the higher model, Rand and Hayi. John is there, who has worked and invented some of the methodology around market-based dynamics and mesh teams. But here, I personally become ever more convinced that Sociocracy is a good template. And you find on this website, on Sociocracy for All, there's a new book by Ted Rao and others. You find a whole bunch of resources. And these are like what Sociocracy calls patterns in terms of ways to structure, but also ways to run things like meetings, decision makings, and so on. And I really think this is coming much closer to the ideal that I think both Michele and I are describing in regards to developing in individual autonomy and agency, but at the same time, making sure that there's cohesion and alignment behind the aim. And here, of course, in this model based on circles. And by the same token, I would kind of like to just show some of the exquisite research that Simone Cicero and Emanuele Quintarelli are providing based on trying to marry sociocracy and some other techniques like Rand and Hayi and Haya to build an entrepreneurial toolkit that people can leverage. And again, it's mostly free on the website here, platform design toolkit. So again, if people are interested in the depth of this, I would really invite you to have a look. And awesome. Of course, we're going to show the links, which I think, Michele, and let's have a look if someone on the chat is able to also share some resources. We will capture them.
Yeah. And yeah, I know we're kind of running late or running out of time. But as I said, I can go longer if you guys want. And we'd love to hear from you. What are your questions, your reflections, your feedback? We'd definitely love your feedback, maybe offline if it's like a harsh kind of feedback, but tell us what you think.
Yeah, and maybe on the topics as much as on this format. And if you want to come on video, feel free to do so. Otherwise, if you don't want to land on the stream, which is being recorded, just leave your video off or put your questions onto the chat, whatever you prefer. Otherwise, I'm gonna point out someone. There's of course there are lots of friends on the session. I want to call on my friend Mihaly. I just have to do this, Mihaly, because you're also just sharing a tool that Timoshinga was providing. Mihaly, and sorry if you're I was just saying sorry if you're in the bathrobe, but you're not.
It's Friday. You're hungry, of course. Hi, Otti. Hi, Michele. It's Friday evening, so actually I'm off work. I'm totally in the civil mode here. So, yeah, great session. Thank you, guys. It's amazing. I really enjoyed it. Took away a lot of ideas, a lot of content. I'm just working on shaping out the HR Congress coming up in November, and it's a fascinating session. I really enjoy these free conversations. I think it was really that was probably the most powerful. That there was no real structure, yet there was a lot of structure in it. So, and I saw the chat. I think people really enjoyed it and taken a lot of content.
We have some lovely people there, but Mihaly, I think most people know you by now. You're the superstar in the HR world, but you have got loads of resources there. Not only the 10 years that you've worked with Dave Ulrich on some of the concepts that he's suggesting, but you have the HR Academy, you have the HR Hard Talk, you have the HR Congress. Is there anything that comes to your mind that might be useful that we share with people?
You caught me off guard. I'm not on top of my mind. Obviously,
let's take it offline in case anything comes to mind. I don't know, Michele, if something
conversation
comes to your mind, but
the way you remember a lot of things, and I put up the content, and that's what we do. And certainly, whatever we do when we have an event, we record it and we make that content available. So even now, when you have the HR Congress coming up, all the recording slides will be free of charge for every attendee. So I'm hopeful that that's a kind of a tiny way we can contribute to share, to facilitate this knowledge sharing and content sharing. But my biggest mission is, I mean, what we talked about this before, Otti, that there are too much talks. I'd like to see movement from ideas to actions to impact, and I think that's where the real sort of action and individual proactiveness needed. Even on this webinar, even on this call, to go back to companies and try to make a difference and move from these discussions. And yeah, it would be great to have a nice step to, let's start making a difference within whatever, of course, within our power. That's hopeful. I'm hopeful that.
And I have to say this, Michele, not only are you a winner of an HR Oscar recently, I've heard, but I really love this because there was this notion of the war in Libya and lots of children being murdered in that war. And the next thing I knew was Michele writing out a post that I've just made a donation of 100 euros or something to the UNICEF Children Recovery Fund or whatever it was for. And please do the same. So I think a big hug from here for being a role model on that, Michele.
And one of the app I'm using on a daily basis, and I really recommend, is the Share a Meal. You find it on the Play Store. You find it on Apple Store. Share a meal, like donate a meal every day. It's in your pocket. And sometimes you just forget how fortunate and how privileged we are in a comfy first world where we are. But it's just really a tiny minority. And I know, Otti, you're very big on inequality. And I think this gap is just widening. Most of us, we came out quite fortunately from this COVID situation, but the worst is really not over yet in the most challenging part of the world.
Thanks, Michele. That's great. And I think, well, I mean, with that, I would say thank you and have a wonderful weekend back in Hungary. Let's see, Michele, if, or do you have a question for Michele or any of the topics, Michele, before you get into your well-deserved weekend?
Obviously, there's a lot. We've talked with Michele, and we have an interview scheduled later on for August, and he's also speaking at the HR Congress. So, can't hear you.
One big family.
Indeed.
All right.
So let me
keep
those questions for the interview.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a great weekend.
I don't know if there are any questions, Michele, on the chat.
I'm looking at the people are contributing resources and giving us some helpful feedback. Yeah, if you guys want to speak, do it now or forever hold your peace, and we'll adjourn and let you get to your weekend. If you're in Europe, if you're in the US like me, you still have to work a few hours, but anyway.
I guess we've lost William in Asia Pac by now, which was
he just left. He hung in there. Oh no, he's still there. He's still there. It's 11 o'clock at night where he is, I think. Thank you, William. You get the prize for the most hardcore. All right. Well, listen, I think we covered a lot. Really, please, thank you, first of all, for hanging in with us for over an hour on a Friday afternoon. I'm truly kind of flattered and honored that you did that. And give us your feedback. Like, what was interesting? What was not so interesting? What do you want to, would you be part of another of these sessions? Would you want to play a bigger role as participants? What topics? Just, one place to go is the LinkedIn page, where you can just write down your comments and we'll read every single one of them. And, we'll try to, if there's interest, to do more of these and adjust so that they're really useful to you.
I can only add to that. Thank you so much. And I mean, wonderful chat. We clearly have the right people here. The radicals, the true radicals, management radicals, compliments for that. Keep it up. Be awesome. Make a difference. And I would say, Michele, we call it a day. It was lovely to talk to you, Michele. Thank you so much.
Ciao,
Very
Otti.
inspirational.
Take care, everyone.
Take care.